24/13, in the minutes of the delegation meeting, March 22nd, that they have the authority to expend the $375,000. On February 6th, the Old Nursing Home Subcommittee received the following answer to our question from Commissioner Sorensen. He said, in March 2010, the county delegation approved $400,000 federal grant for the purchase of the pellet boilers and the laying of piping for that project. It logically follows, since the boilers being installed in the old building would be used to heat the new building, as the piping was laid between the two buildings. This is because the pellet boilers were to be the primary source of heat for the new home, and propane the backup fuel source. Thus, the commissioners expected the cost of installation would come from the $23.5 million budget for the building of the new home. On February 8th, 2012, during the Commissioners' weekly meeting, Conway reporter Damon Steer questioned Commissioner Sorensen. If the delegation was caught off guard by the $375,000 expense to install the boiler, as it was not known at the time of approval for the new nursing home, and therefore this was outside the scope of the approval. Reporter Steer further questioned the commissioners as to when exactly did the commissioners learn that it would cost $375,000 to install the boiler. Commissioner Sorensen's response was, not until they'd put it out to bid 4 weeks ago. 4 weeks ago. Reporter Damon followed this, so you were caught off guard by the cost. Commissioner Sorensen said that we were caught off guard by the amount of the cost. I could not believe it was going to cost $375,000 myself. But when you look at the contract for the purchase of the boilers, there were exclusions in there and said that they would not provide the space, the electrical hookup, the plumbing that was going to attach the boilers to. Theirs was to connect the boilers to the storage container, the hoppers, the pumps, and what was involved with the boiler. What we had to provide was everything else, piping, electricity, and plumbing. Commissioner Sorensen then offered his now famous Sears washing machine delivery and install defense. Quoting the commissioners, Sears would say that they would deliver it, install it, and see that it was functioning. But Sears don't tell you that they don't plan on bringing the electricity to the unit, they don't plan on bringing the plumbing from wherever it needs to go to the unit. They are installing their piece of equipment and expect you to plug it into the wall, and the water is ready to plug into the space. The purchase of a heating system is a budget item that any homeowner will cost into the construction of a new home before they move forward with a mortgage. If the homeowner simply purchased a boiler but did not budget for the boiler, for the plumber to install the boiler, then the homeowner would be in peril when it came time to heat the home, and the funds to correct their mistake were no longer available. Most homeowners, unlike our commissioners, don't have the luxury of a $2 million contingency fund to rely on for their inept project planning. I suggest the commissioners come tied clean, admit their shortcomings, request after the fact approval from the delegation for the new $375,000 expense under their obligation stated in RSA 2413, and allow the delegation to vote on this expense. My personal statement.
Do we have a copy of that?
Sure.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Mr. Chairman, I have a letter that would address what has been talked about so far this morning, in particular to address Mark McConkey, Representative McConkey's
Okay, can we do this?
comment.
What I'd like to do is get onto the agenda, and then could we come back to this? At least let's finish up the nursing home. That's a critical thing that we have to do, the nursing home budget. So everybody should get a copy of your letter, and we will address that. I'm going to put it into the agenda right after the nursing home budget.
I just wanted equal time. You gave him equal time.
I will give you time, yes, but we have people here from the nursing home, let's address their annual budget request, and then we will come back to you prior to going into the discussion with the county attorney on his budget, and make sure that we fully cover it. I'm not taking any more questions on this at this point. We need to go ahead with the nursing home. Mrs. McKenzie.
Representative Fleck, I'm not sure how you'd like to proceed in regard to going over just with the budget. We've handed out two packets. One is from Mrs. Gary, having to do with the, I believe it's year-end report and statistics. The other has to do with what we tend to pass out, and it's a budget in regard to, or documents to show where we are in reference to last year. And last year, and again, I always look at profit and loss, not the issues. Obviously, we met our budget, actually did much better than what we projected. But as far as our loss, as far as where we were this past year, $962,886.64. Ironically, that's about $1,000 under last year.
Yes, but
Mr. Chairman, could you ask Sandra to tell us which one of these sheets that she's working off of, please? The
Okay.
date on it?
it's this sheet right here.
Not this one here, the supplemental
Oh,
sheet.
okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Also of note, and this is the last we'll be talking about probably of what we were doing last year, we increased our beds so that we, or at least our occupancy rate, so therefore we had 7,386 additional patient resident days. So again, just some things to keep in mind. Also, in this packet, I've presented to you other documents that the subcommittee has asked for, and others having to do with some of our assumptions. Working on this new budget. Our private pay daily rate has increased from $262 in 2011 to $275 in 2012. Our Medicaid daily rate, now again, when we were working on this new building, we knew that because of our capital expenditures, we knew that our daily rate, per diem rate for Medicaid would increase. And as I've mentioned before, this is set twice a year, once in January and then once in June for the beginning of July. Our rate went from $149.54, and that's the last quarter of 2011, to $156.99, which is the first quarter of 2012. Other things to keep in mind when you look at revenue is that the stimulus payments have been discontinued. The last payment we received in 2011 was $320,000. One thing that we do not budget for is our pro share, but you would see that when you look at our Medicaid revenue for last year. Last year we received $600,000. Other years, or last couple of years, we've received about $300,000, but we do not budget for that. And that's obviously a cushion, and we've been asked through subcommittees not to budget.
Since we do have, since we do have many individuals from the public here, could you just say a brief comment about the pro share so everybody understands what we're talking about?
We receive a disproportionate number of Medicaid residents, and so therefore that assists us in that care, so that therefore, and perhaps other private organizations, they receive more private pay, or a very large number of skilled residents, so they receive their revenue that way. But when you're averaging about 70 residents per day, that helps us with that.
Good. Thank you.
Now, our bed tax is very important, and I ask you to give some consideration to our MQIP payments. The last document I attached in your bulletin is House Bill 11997, which addresses this bed tax. There is a bill that out there that would exempt certain entities from payment of the fee on the net patient services revenues under RSA 84-6. And essentially, that's the continuing care retirement communities. They now pay a bed tax. It's being proposed that they don't pay a bed tax. That would be all fine and good, and no one likes taxes. The problem is that in the county, in our system, that would change our numbers dramatically. It would decrease our revenue and increase our payment, our expenditure. So keep that in mind, because you will be seeing this on the House floor in the very near future. And that's very important. And again, you know, we try to be as exact as we can. This is unknown, and this is an area that's in your hands. And that's where we are with that.
If I could.
Yes, excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So on the MQIP, we receive, the nursing homes across the state receive more money than they pay.
What happens is that it's a juggle of monies. We pay money, and then we
Right.
get a little bit more money. And this has been going on for years.
Okay, so all nursing homes,
Pay a bed tax.
no, all nursing homes receive more than they pay in.
Correct. And it's a split. It's not only from the state, it's also from the federal government.
Thank you.
Also, something that you need to keep in mind is the federal government, effective October 1st, decreased our payments, and it's category payments by 11.1%. So that has been factored into our budget. And areas such as overtime, and we were looking at all of these kinds of things, and we looked at Family Leave Act impacting our overtime, and we see that there's about 6,400 hours having to do with trying to cover for Family Leave Act, which is about 3 FTEs. We have another 4 FTEs in our budget that's covering things such as sickness, vacations, all of those things where you still have to have someone working, and again, you have to supply care as well. Then I believe it was Representative Batson that suggested let's look at rehab and put our revenue and expense next to one another. So we have that for you on that page, on the end of that page. And then Bob will get into the issues of our latest Eastern propane quote, as well as our pellet boiler estimates. So that's some information to keep in mind as we go through our...
Could you just go back to the Medicare rate to make sure everybody understands exactly what's happened and how those funds are determined? Could you?
As far as our per diem rate?
The Medicare rate, you said effective October 1.
Oh.
That was decreased.
Yeah. When we have a Medicare resident, affectionately known as skilled residents, we receive this information, data goes into the computer, and we have a RUG, what we call a RUG code, and it equates to how much money we will get. Well, the federal government attempted to decrease that monies a year or so ago, and it didn't have the effect that they thought it would be. So they're now taking deeper cuts. So the cut that they're looking at is 11.1%. But again, Paul and I have worked in this, and we've decreased our Medicare rate a little bit as far as our revenue, expected revenue. But again, we're usually so conservative with the rehabilitation component of it that we don't think it's going to be as, we've allowed for that, and we don't think, we didn't take the full 11%. But again, it's, we constantly look at those kinds of things.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Joe. All right. So we'll go on to the revenue. Our Medicaid room and board, we budgeted last year $5,651,678.
Where are we?
We're on the revenue budget worksheet. revenue?
Okay, I didn't bring mine.
They just came out. These
Oh.
are from-
All I got was expenditure. I didn't get revenue.
Everybody should have a, what is it, 2 pages,
Yeah.
2-page sheet on revenue.
Sorry, all I got was expense.
Yes,
Okay.
Sandy.
We budgeted last year 5,651,678. This year we've budgeted 5,900,106. That is basically in fact due to our increase in rate. If you look, and if you were looking at our actual dollars, someone could ask, well, why are you budgeting lower? And that's because the 600,000 was received in pro share, that, and that's where that money is put, even though we don't budget for that information, that money. As far as the skilled room rate is concerned, we budgeted last year on 902,177. This year we budgeted 1,015,065. That's based on the actuals from last year. We did bump it down a notch, and again we are conservative, having to do with our rehabilitation part of that. Our private room rate, again, I mentioned that it had gone from $262 to $275 per day. We budgeted last year $2,757,969, and this year we budgeted $2,894,815. Personal resources pretty much remains the same. We budgeted $800,000 last year. It's $820,000 this year.
Joe,
And then we get into our, I'm sorry.
yeah, that's okay. Back up at your skilled versus private. What's your percentage?
Percentage as far as numbers of residents?
Yeah.
Or
We
Paula?
budget for 7 skilled residents a day, and
Pardon?
I think 7 skilled residents a day, and I believe it's 28 private pay residents a day is what we budget for.
Thank you. And then the remainder of the 103
Is Medicaid.
is Medicaid. Thank you.
Representative Alden, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Two real quick questions. One is that the private insurance is included in the private room and board if they have long-term insurance care?
We don't bill private, the families bill their own private insurance and they get a check from their
Okay,
private
so that would be
insurance.
included in that number,
Yeah,
okay.
they pay.
All right, and the second thing is, could you just expound a little bit about what personal resources means?
It's Medicaid patients, it's their Social Security income and pension income. They have to pay that portion to the nursing home, so that's what the Medicaid patients pay to us.
So just a quick follow-up. So Medicaid patients, we receive the 157 plus a number from their Social Security checks as well?
That's deducted from what the state pays us. We get $157.99 per day times X number of days. Then they minus out what the patient pays to us, and we get the difference.
Okay, so
From
it
the
doesn't
state.
enhance that 157
No.
reimbursement?
No.
That remains constant? Okay, thank you.
Okay, physical therapy skilled, we budgeted last year $182,000, this year $225,000. Part B, we budgeted $350,000 last year, we've budgeted $550,000 this year. Occupational therapy skills, we budgeted $175,000 last year, $195,000 this year. Occupational therapy, Part B, $300,000 last year, $440,000 this year. Speech skilled, $80,000 last year, $79,000 this year. And speech therapy Part B, 100,000 this year, 100,000 last year, 170,000 this year. Paula, do you want to speak to our revenue having to do the impact on, we do list these, but that is a package deal that we have for our skilled residents.
Right, with the skilled, that's not added to our skilled room and board line item. We don't get paid separately for therapies. We get one lump sum per day for a skilled resident, which covers their therapies, their pharmacy, anything to do with their care.
It's broken out though, so you can identify what we're receiving. Under laboratory skilled, 12,000 last year, 12,000 this year. Our bed tax, we budgeted $1 million last year. We budgeted $1.2 million this year. And again, that is an unknown.
When does that come down?
When are you going to hear it? Or
No, when do you receive it?
Quarterly.
You
So we'll
receive
receive the first payment in April.
Okay, and that's, if I could, right now, that's the one that's up in the air, right?
Correct.
And, okay, well, don't expect it. Did I say that? That hasn't been solved yet, that whole issue, so.
Okay. Pharmacy, 86,000 we budgeted last year, 85,000 this year. Medical supplies under private, 18,000 last year, 21,000 this year. Income from meals, 230,000 last year, the same for this year. And then we have our contractuals. Do you want to explain that?
The contractuals, for Medicaid, it's the difference between our private pay rate and our Medicaid rate. We have to deduct that out because we use a private pay rate on the room and board line item. We budget for gross, and it's the same. All the skilled therapies that were listed above come out down the bottom because we don't get paid for those. And then Part B, we get paid about half of what we bill for, roughly.
So going down to the bottom of the page, last year we budgeted for $8,941,231. This year we are budgeting for $9,822,312.
Yes.
Ask Sandy.
Okay.
Sandy, I guess you confused me, or Paula's finally got me confused on this contractual allowance. Why do you show on this sheet that you passed out that you first went over an expense of $298,000 plus?
That was
and yet you turn around and show almost $500,000 in income, and you don't have any revenue here.
Those are actuals from last year that she put on that sheet that she gave you.
This one.
Yes. Those
And
are
so we didn't get any revenue last year?
Yes.
Yes.
It's right on the left-hand side.
Mine's blank. It says continual contractual allowance.
Revenue. These are revenues.
Yeah,
These
but
are
you,
expenses.
my question
no-
is, you don't show any revenue here
Not on
on
your.
that sheet, but you do show it here. Why?
It's a negative revenue, so we put it under the expense side. It gets backed out of your revenue.
These are positives. The negatives
No.
always show as
No,
a
those are
minus.
negatives, right there, see the
See the
negative,
minus?
and the minus.
Oh, okay, I'm with you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. And now I'm on page 1, starting with nursing home administration.
So, if I could,
Yes, go ahead. Regina.
so you're anticipating approximately $1 million more in income for this year than you had last year.
And it is really, I believe it's contingent on that, the bed tax issue. Again, we started doing this in October and hearing information in regard to the bed tax. But our room rate has gone up. We're holding our own, having to do with the decrease in the Medicare, the cut of 11.1%. Our increase in our per diem rate from $149.54 to $156.99 there may be a blip in that, but I don't think it's gonna be a huge decrease because of all of our new equipment and how that is all divided.
If I could follow up.
Go ahead, follow up.
Okay, the nursing home, the new nursing home has been open how many months of this year, or last year?
We moved in the middle of September.
Okay, so did you see an increase in your income in the last quarter of last year?
Well, our income, which side?
The revenue.
Well, we didn't get any rate increases until
Till
January
January 1.
1st.
Okay,
We
but
didn't
you
get
had
anything.
occupancy higher.
Our occupancy was 7,000 something patient days over the entire year.
Right, but I was just looking at I was just thinking about the last quarter.
No,
We had.
we were basically, our room rate had been unchanged. We had maximum occupancy, so you're not going to see it there.
Okay.
Everything else was somewhat stable, so those are the areas that we would look at.
Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify, did that answer your question? And I have, are you getting at whether or not we actually increased the number of patients or residents?
Pretty hard to when you're at 100%.
But
Yeah.
excuse me. You did not have 103 patients in the old nursing home.
Yes, we did.
Here we go.
You did,
Yes, we did.
during that quarter.
Yes, we did.
And-
The only time you'll see
Okay.
that is when there's a bed change. For the last year and a half, our occupancy has been up, and we increased by 7,000 resident days this year, and that 7,000 has to do with when residents go to the hospital. If someone passes, then there's a bed transfer, but we have had occupancy.
Commissioner Swanson.
Just for the sake of the general public who don't have budget copies in front of them, what Sandy's talking about is saving $881,000 in new revenue this year based on other years. Now, some of that may show up in the expense account. You have to spend money to make money. But it's $881,000 increase in revenue for this year.
Yes, Representative Schmidt.
Promotion, I should get a raise. Sandy, I can shed a little bit of light on the bed tax. I don't believe that will affect you this year. What that legislation was, it applied to, as an example, the Taylor community. What these folks do for a very large upfront fee is they go in there, they will never participate in Medicaid, they do not get Medicaid. Contractually, they won't get it. Their objection is to paying a Medicaid bed tax when they derive absolutely no benefit from it. There's about 7 such homes in New Hampshire. What the legislation did, all it would do really would be to allow them to apply to the federal government for a waiver, which is extremely unlikely to happen, even if that legislation should pass, which I think is unlikely. So,
Great.
there you go.
Makes me feel a little better.
Unless you're in a Taylor community. So.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to go on there. Go ahead, Sandy.
Okay. Nursing home administration. In overtime, we budgeted $2,500 last year. We budgeted $1,000 this year. In salary, we budgeted $339,609 last year. We were assuming an increase this year, so that's what the non-union rates have been established here. $339,609 for salary last year, $343,371 this year. Social Security, medical insurance, retirement, workers' comp, unemployment tax, dental insurance. Those are all things that come from the administration building. I don't have a.
All based on wages.
All based on wages, correct. Education and conferences, we have budgeted $4,500 last year. We budgeted $2,000 this year. Medicare expense, we'll move on to auditing and legal. We budgeted $50,000 last year, $50,000 this year. Other fees and services, $1,300 last year, $500 this year. Office supplies,